Two of the most central characters in HBO's The Wire are Slim Charles and Bodie Broadus. Slim Charles first appears in Season 3 as a relatively minor character, hired by the Barksdales to fight their war against Marlo Stanfield. Slim operates at a middle management level role, having control over the street shooters but answering to the likes of Stringer and Avon. Effectively, he is the street version of Jay Landsman. Wise and intelligent, his respected reputation as an effective asset grows over the course of the series, as does his importance within the Barksdale organization, as best symbolized by his answering back to and questioning of Stringer Bell's decision to hit Clay Davis. He's in the room as Stringer and Avon quarrel, important enough to be in the room, not important enough to take part in the discussion, as again symbolized by when he lowers his head when Stringer looks at him. In Season 4, after the Barksdales have collapsed, Slim is working for East Side boss Proposition Joe. At first it comes off as surprising that Slim would have crossed the chessboard to the other side and joined the Barksdales as rivals, but you can definitely see Prop Joe rubbing his hands at the idea of hiring a man as level-headed and intelligent as Slim as his number two. In Season 5, Marlo murders Prop Joe and assumes control over the co-op, offering Slim control over the East Side, which he turns down. In a manner of speaking, Slim Charles worked for all three major kingpins in the show, Avon, Joe and Marlo, and by the end of the series he appears to have become the co-head of the co-op along with Fatface Rick. Slim Charles is one of the rare winners of the show, and we can't say it wasn't deserved, oh no doubt. I'm not sure if this metaphor quite works, as technically Slim was never a pawn, but many consider him to be a smart-ass pawn that crossed the chessboard and became a queen. Bodhi, on the other hand, has a far worse fate. A key example of someone chewed up by the institutions that the show puts a magnifying glass to. Initially having a violent and quick temper, Bodhi proves himself adept at managing a corner, but his hard work and dedication to his role never pays off, as after the Barksdales fall, Bodhi is still out there on the corner slinging. There is something that I think every working man can relate to when, after Bodhi whips his only remaining corner left into shape, Marlo comes along and forces him to take his package, slashing the already low-level amount of money Bodhi makes from the corner. He made his bosses rich and was left out in the street, literally. Dejected at how his life has turned out, horrified at his friend Little Kevin's murder, and becoming alienated with Marlo's codeless, sick ways, Bodhi decides to talk to the cops to get the likes of Marlo off the street, but before he can do so, he is gunned down by Marlo's hitmen Chris, Snoop and O-Dog. Rooted to the spot, unable to move like the pawn he is, Bodhi dies on the corner he spent most of his life on, ending as another statistic for the streets of Baltimore. Slim and Bodhi appear to have a good relationship with each other. Bodhi is something of an unruly younger brother who Slim has to reel in, and in Season 4, it's Slim who provides Bodhi with product to build his corner. Bodhi speaks to Slim after Marlo gives him his ultimatum, either get on Marlo's tit or step off. Some shameless shit. It's essentially corporate big business coming along and forcing a small shop that's been family run for years to sell. Slim Charles has one of his most memorable lines during his exchange with Bodhi. Slim says,
"People I'm working with now,"
and then shakes his head without elaborating, and he advises Bodhi that if he fights Marlo, he's on his own. Then says,
"But if you want my advice..."
But Bodhi cuts him off, saying he doesn't want it and walking off, ignoring Slim's calls. I've always been curious about this scene, Slim's comment especially, and I've wondered what Slim meant by the people I'm working with now. He's clearly unhappy about something, but is not dwelling on the old days, acknowledging times have changed. Who exactly is he lamenting working with? Not Prop Joe, surely, as Joe was an intelligent and forward-thinking boss. Cheese, maybe? I mean, Slim is a key figure in the co-op, so he must be talking about Joe and the rest of the guys. That's who he's working with. And if you think about it, it does make sense. It was Slim who said to Avon in Season 3 that if it's a lie, then we fight on that lie. He was hired as a mercenary in the first place. Combat and street warfare is what he knows. He's a wartime consigliere. But these are times of strained peace, and maybe Slim, deep down, would rather pick up his guns and take out Marlo, something he came so close to doing in Season 3, but the order didn't come through, and Slim is now frustrated with the way the co-op does nothing as Marlo runs rampant through the streets of Westside. There's a line Slim says to Joe in the co-op, something like, hope you got something better to say to him than Stringer did, when Joe entertains the idea of reaching out to Marlowe. Perhaps it's Slim's tact way of saying, there are some people you can't talk to, can't reason with. And what he's saying to Bodhi is that these gangsters, unlike the old days, are not going to help him tool up and get rid of Marlowe. I'm curious what Slim's advice to Bodhi was going to be. Of course, ultimately it doesn't matter. The point of the scene is to highlight how frustrated, trapped, and isolated Bodhi feels. It's a bit like a scene in The Sopranos after Vito Spatafore is outed as a chap-swearing ass muncher, and the crew question Finn, and Silvio asks, when the security guard was sucking him off, and then Finn corrects him saying it was the other way around. Again, the point of this exchange is to highlight the crew weren't aware that Vito was catching, not pitching, and now they are. But even still, it's fun to ponder on what exactly Silvio was going to ask Finn here. If you want my guess, I think he would have awkwardly asked whether Vito looked like he was enjoying it or whether he looked stoic, to perhaps entertain the idea that maybe it wasn't a gay thing, but perhaps Vito was punishing the security guard or something, asserting dominance. Anyway, what was Slim going to say? Come over to Eastside and work for Joe? Quit the life and get an education? Find Avon's grenades and go after Marlowe? Well, the only realistic option out of these is moving over to Eastside, but that was never going to happen. Unlike Slim, who is hired and paid by the highest bidder, Bodie is loyal through and through to Westside. Fuck all them Eastside bitches. Plus, who's to say Joe would even want another angry young street dealer? I can see that being what Slim was about to say. You want my advice? Come work for me. Ditch this corner. And Bodhi doesn't want to hear his advice because he doesn't want to even entertain the idea of leaving Westside, and he knows what Slim's going to say. Why exactly Bodhi didn't join Eastside is something we covered in more detail in another video, but I think it's more likely Slim was simply going to advise Bodhi to keep his head down, take Marlowe's package, don't rock the boat, see the bigger picture. Slim Charles knows that kings come and go, and Marlowe, especially Marlowe, given the way he is, won't last, won't live forever. It's advice that is apt for Slim to give. As a mercenary for hire, Slim doesn't take things personally. He was working for Stringer, who was close to Prop Joe. Then he worked for Avon, who hated Joe. Then he worked for Joe himself, and even the man who killed Joe, Marlowe. Not to mention he killed a few of Marlowe's guys in Season 3. Slim knew to put his personal feelings aside in this game. He knew his worth, his value, which wasn't much in a game where players come and go. He only really broke this attitude once in the show, when he popped Cheese to avenge Joe, and even then you could argue there were business reasons for taking Cheese out. Slim is diplomatic and wise. Bodhi is aggressive and emotional. Bodhi was thinking short term. Slim had the long game in mind. When you don't have all the cards, when situations are beyond your control, it's better to be pragmatic, to be flexible, even if it means having to swallow your pride and work for a man like Marlowe. That's how Slim would have seen it. Bodhi, however, was fed up. He despised Marlowe's kind, and when they came for him, he refused to back down. As the saying goes, better to die on your feet than to live on your knees. Heck, Slim may have been in Bodhi's exact position a few months earlier. We don't know how Slim started working for Joe. For all we know, after Stringer was killed and the Barksdales got locked up, maybe Slim saw the writing on the wall and got in touch with Eastside to offer his services. One boss same as the next, as Poot says in one scene. Slim made the right call. He has that kind of street smart. If Bodhi was in that position, he might have wanted to tool up against Marlowe, got what was left of Westside and go after the Stanfields, and his ending would have been the same. It's quite a sad scene in hindsight. Here are the two last remaining soldiers from the old days of the Barksdale dominance. One would go on to become a major player, the other would end up in a pool of his own blood. Slim was trying to school Bodhi here, to tell him to be patient, that after Marlowe goes, he'll be back in business, but Bodhi just didn't want to hear it. So what do you make of this scene, and what do you think Slim's advice to Bodhi was going to be? Let me know in the comment section below, subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.